Imagine stepping into a medieval kitchen. The smell hits you first. Smoke, animal fat, damp straw, and something sour lingering in the air. The fire flickers beneath a blackened pot. A servant stirs something thick and bubbling, while chickens scratch across the floor, and hanging from the beams above are rows of drying herbs. And maybe a few things that look suspiciously like animal guts. You're hungry, but you might lose your appetite very soon, because what's cooking here is not the kind of feast you've seen in movies. This is the real food of the Middle Ages. Strange, bland, sometimes revolting, and occasionally deadly. Tonight we're going to explore the worst foods of the medieval world, the dishes that would make even the hungriest knight hesitate. From spoiled meat and bizarre delicacies to foods so bad it could kill you. This is the dark side of medieval dining. The harsh reality of medieval eating. To understand why medieval food could be so unpleasant, you first have to understand the world people lived in. There were no refrigerators, no plastic wrap, no global imports or supermarkets. Food was seasonal, local, and often one bad harvest away from starvation. For most of the population, peasants, servants, and laborers, diet was about survival, not enjoyment. They ate whatever was available: grains, beans, root vegetables, and anything they could preserve for winter. Spoilage was common, rotten smells were normal, and eating was often a gamble between hunger and sickness. Spoiled meat and questionable pies. Let's start with something everyone assumes was better than it really was: meat. In theory, medieval kings and nobles dined on roasted beef, venison, and pork. But meat went bad quickly. Without refrigeration, it had to be salted, smoked, or dried. And those methods didn't always work perfectly. Even in royal kitchens, the smell of slightly off meat was common. It was often disguised with vinegar, wine, or heavy spices to mask the taste. Street vendors in towns sold meat pies and soups, but hygiene was non-existent. Leftovers from the day before were often reheated and resold. Some historians describe medieval fast food as a health hazard, a mix of mystery meat, grease, and guesswork. A noble might eat swan or peacock, a peasant the innards of a pig or cow. And while the former sounds more glamorous, both were risky. You never quite knew what you were eating or how long it had been sitting there. Offal, blood, and everything left over. Medieval people wasted nothing. If an animal was slaughtered, every part was used, from snout to tail, liver to lungs. Offal, the internal organs, was a staple food for the poor. Liver, kidneys, heart, intestines, and even stomach were boiled, fried, or turned into puddings. Sometimes blood was mixed in too, as in black pudding, a sausage made from congealed animal blood. The flavor? Strong, metallic, often bitter. But when food was scarce, taste wasn't the point. Nutrition was. Even fish were used entirely. Bones were ground into paste, heads were boiled for broth, salted fish turned slimy in barrels, but were still eaten after months of storage. If you lived through a medieval winter, you learned quickly not to be picky. The bland and the boring. Not all bad medieval food was disgusting. Some was just depressing. For most peasants, daily meals were almost identical. Thick pottage, a stew made of grains, vegetables, and sometimes a bit of meat if you were lucky. It was boiled every day in the same pot, refilled endlessly with whatever was available. The flavor was mild to non-existent. The texture, mushy. The smell, a mix of smoke and cabbage. People might eat the same meal every single day for months. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, pottage, bread, and ale. It kept you alive, but it didn't bring joy. And after weeks of the same gray stew, even hunger must have felt dull. The truly revolting. Desperation. Foods, now we get to the worst of the worst. The things people only ate when desperation struck. During famines, there were many, medieval Europeans ate whatever they could find. Grain stores emptied fast, and once the salted meat ran out, survival took over. People boiled bark and roots. They ate weeds, leaves, and even grass. In extreme cases, historical records describe people resorting to leather, dogs, or worse. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 was one of the darkest times in medieval Europe. Relentless rain destroyed crops, and food prices soared beyond reach. Chroniclers wrote of entire villages starving, of people digging up dead animals to eat, or baking bread mixed with sawdust. It's not just bad food, it's food that carried the smell of tragedy. When food wasn't spoiled or desperate, it could still be deadly. Preservation techniques were primitive. Salted meat could contain bacteria, fermented grains could grow mold that produced toxins, and without understanding of germs, people didn't know why they got sick. Medieval cookware added to the danger. Pots were made of lead or pewter, both of which leached heavy metals into food when heated. Water pipes in some towns were made of lead too, so even clean drinking water might slowly poison you. And then there were the hygiene practices, or lack of them. Butchers killed animals near open streets. Waste was thrown into rivers. Food was stored in cellars crawling with insects and rats. If you didn't die of cold or war in the Middle Ages, dinner might finish the job. The misguided luxury foods of the nobility. Now let's travel from the peasant's pot to the noble's banquet hall. Surely the rich ate better, right? Not always. For nobles, food was a statement, a show of power, not taste. Exotic dishes were meant to impress guests, no matter how bizarre. At some feasts, cooks served entire animals stitched back together after roasting. Peacocks, swans, even pigs dressed to look alive. Dyes were added to food to make it appear more colorful, but the ingredients, like saffron, ashes, or animal bile, didn't always improve the flavor. And for all that wealth, food poisoning didn't discriminate. The same fires that roasted meats also filled rooms with smoke and soot. Servants working near them were half-blind, coughing from the fumes. The glamour of medieval feasting was often an illusion built on discomfort. Fish days and foul smells. One thing the church made certain, everyone had to fast from meat many times a year. On Fridays and during Lent, meat was banned, meaning fish became the alternative. But here's the problem. Fresh fish spoils fast, and not everyone lived near the sea. By the time salted cod or herring reached inland towns, it could be weeks old. Barrels leaked, salt ran out, worms infested the flesh. Still, people ate it. They had to. So fish day might have smelled worse than the latrine outside. Bread and the mystery additives. Even bread, the most basic food of all, could be dangerous. For peasants, fine white bread was a dream. They ate coarse, dark loaves made from rye, barley, or oats. Sometimes when grain ran short, millers mixed in whatever they had, including beans, acorns, or even ground bark. If rye became infected with a fungus called ergot, eating the bread could cause hallucinations, gangrene, and death. It was known as St. Anthony's fire, and it wiped out whole communities. So the next time you imagine tearing into a hearty medieval loaf, remember, it might have been poisoned from the start. The smell of the medieval meal. So what did it all smell like? Picture this, a smoky kitchen with no chimney, meat slowly burning on a spit, boiling cabbage, onions, and barley, a mix of animal dung, sweat, and ale. To medieval people, that was the smell of home. To us, it might be unbearable. What the poor and rich had in common. Whether king or peasant, everyone in the Middle Ages lived closer to hunger than we do today. For the poor, food was monotonous and limited. For the rich, it was excessive and strange. But both shared the same risks: spoilage, illness, and a constant battle against the elements. That's why feasts mattered so much. Not just for luxury, but for relief. A full stomach, even for one night, was a victory. The taste of survival. If you had lived in the 14th century, what would dinner mean to you? Maybe a bowl of pottage cooked over the same fire that heated your room. Maybe a hunk of rye bread with salt. Maybe, if you were lucky, a piece of salted meat that didn't smell too strong. You wouldn't eat for pleasure. You'd eat for strength, to work another day, to survive the cold. And when you think about it, that makes medieval food, however bad, one a story of resilience. Looking back today, we laugh at medieval recipes and strange dishes. We wrinkle our noses at the thought of boiled eel pie or fermented fish paste. But for the people who lived then, those meals represented skill, endurance, and ingenuity. They cooked without modern tools. They preserved without refrigeration. They made flavor from scarcity and meals from nothing. So yes, some of it was terrible, revolting, even deadly. But it was also proof that humans will always find a way to eat, to adapt, and to survive. Because in the Middle Ages, the worst food wasn't just what was on the plate, it was the hunger that made you eat it anyway.